Thanks for having me. This is amazing. I've never been here before. I mean, I've been here before downstairs, never seen all these people. We always think that we're, you know, especially in Hollywood, like, we're the only ones. And every now and then someone will say something to you on a set, and it'll be like being gay in 1948 or something. I'm like, really? What did you say about Joan Crawford? Like, did you say about Reagan? Like, that sounds like music to my ears. So every now and then we kind of meet in furtive little groups. I do see some familiar faces here from NR Cruises and from Ricochet, so thanks for having me. What I want to talk about tonight is the good news for us that's also kind of bad news for me personally, because media is completely fragmented now. And when I started 23 years ago, 24 in January, there were the big three, you know, Ford, Chrysler, and GM, ABC, NBC, CBS, and then little ANC, or what we call that Fox at the time, FBC. And there were the three networks that controlled everything. And we didn't have Fox News, we didn't have anything like that. We didn't have any kind of polemical, argumentative conversations during the day on television. We didn't have any news. We didn't have newspapers. We had the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. And that was really all we had, and that's when people read the paper every day. That's when papers really mattered. Eventually, I occasionally write for LA Times. I don't do that often, for, you know, obvious reasons. But here's a, anybody ever been to the LA Times building? It's just too loud, my thing. The LA Times building downtown is this beautiful building, and this is a metaphor for what's happened to the news business. It's a gigantic, it's a gorgeous building. And you walk in, and it's like walking into like a movie set. The lobby is like black onyx with a big globe, a beautiful desk in the center, and you really, I bet you felt like when you walked into that lobby in the old days that you were walking into some place that really mattered. Now when you go to the LA Times, you actually close down that lobby, you go in the side door, which I think at that point was a janitor's closet. There's a counter there, and you give them your ID, and they scuttle you in along the side, and kind of edge around. There's people up you're not allowed to go into, and then you go into this horrible sort of suite of elevators. And that's a perfect metaphor for what's happened to the news business and the newspaper business. And that is fantastic news for us, because all of that fragmentation means that there are no more people, there aren't as many people sitting in offices deciding what counts and what doesn't count. And so the headline for my topic tonight is really, stop whining. Our side complains all the time. That's all we do. We watch, my dear friend, our dear friend Ann Coulter is the only person who watches MSNBC. She's it. You know, I see her every now and then. She goes, LA, we have dinner, and then the first 10 minutes are always about some outrageous thing happening on MSNBC. I always say, Ann, no one watches MSNBC. You're it. So we have manufactured our own kind of small bore outrage industry, where we watch their fringe left-wing media, and we tweet it, and we read their tweets, and we complain, and we create this idea that somehow this is progress, and there's a huge, vast public out there that we're not talking to. And so that's what's so gratifying about tonight, is that one thing he said is that Mark said is that we need to persuade. And that's where we fell down. The past 8 years is in persuasion. And the good news, there's some good news, which is it's never been more exciting, and there have never been more opportunities to do that, to reach people, to persuade them, to engage with them, people who don't want to come to a meeting like this, who aren't really going to be thinking about politics all the time, but who are nonetheless kind of on our side. That's why the video is so hilarious, because we all know that's true. I used to say that the most powerful direct mail piece the Republican Party had was the pay stub. You look at it, what the hell? Like, that number is crazy, right? And and everybody gets it, and everybody looks at it. And it's one of the reasons why I think Hollywood so the rules, because most of the actors, directors, and writers, we never see the pay stub. You know, the paycheck goes to our agent, it goes to our lawyer, our manager, every day's a cut. By the time we get it, it's already been cut down, so an actual pay stub itself is sort of, I don't know, somebody took it away at some point. And so we never actually see what the government does to our money before we get it. I forget, I don't think it was Milton Friedman, but one great economist said that if you ever wanted to make government smaller, all you had to do is remove withholding and make them write a check at the end of every quarter, every pay period, because that would really hurt. And when you write a check for that, that's when you start to see revolution. Not that we're revolutionaries, but that would be a great, just for a year, be a very clarifying moment. Everyone would turn into those old white men. So let me, I mean, my history is a sort of a dyed-in-the-wool sort of East Coast establishment Rhino Republican. I'm being honest here, we're all one friends, right? It's a family here, I can tell you what I really am. But in Hollywood, I'm, you know, right-wing fascist, as far as they're concerned. And I actually once, I once was complaining about this, and I realized that the good news is that 1 out of every 3 Hollywood conservatives goes on to become president of the United States. And that was not really a joke when I told it the first time, but now it's really not true. There's a lot more openness. Now, on any movie set or TV set you go into, there's, you know, it's divided like a movie set budget with above the line and below the line. And below the line is sort of all the hard costs, all the people, the crew, the set, all the people who actually do the real work. And above the line are all the directors and writers and actors, people who swan around eating free food. Below the line is almost entirely conservative. Above the line is almost entirely liberal. And that's really all you really need to know about the culture today of big government liberalism, is that the fat cats like it. And our argument is never going to be with the fat cats, we're never going to convince them. Our argument's going to be with people and voters. The crew, they're with us. The fat cats are not. And we spend too much time complaining about fat cats and not enough time talking to the crew. I discovered that. We did a show, a show on TBS, Duncan Sullivan's. We did a show, and we had a little break. One of our lead actor broke his jaw, having a wired shut, so we shut down for 6 weeks. We had a show, an episode that we were filming that week, and it was in probably mid-March, early March this year. And one of our characters was being audited by the IRS. And so we had a little scene in the IRS office. And in between the time we started that episode in March and then actually ended up shooting it 6.5 weeks later, there was this, I remember this big scandal about the IRS. And I remember walking to the set, which we hadn't seen in 6 weeks, which is almost a time capsule. And our set director is very, very good, very accurate. And they had a picture, as they all do in the government offices, of the president, and then the commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, which when 6 weeks later we showed up, that person had been fired or gone. And so we're trying to figure out what to do with that picture. And someone on the crew said, why don't you just take the photograph out and leave a blank frame on the wall? Which we did. And so we start the scene with a close-up of a blank frame, and we pull out to the scene in the IRS office. Now, maybe 100 people are going to get that joke, but it's worth it because the crew loved it. Everybody above the line had no idea what we were doing or why we were doing that, but the crew loved it, and that's the subject of the message tonight. Also, full disclosure, my first presidential election was in 1984, and I voted for Walter Mondale. Okay, being honest. I was a sophomore in college. It's a sophomore thing to do. And I later had a chance to meet Reagan, President Reagan, when he was in his office, the Die-Hard building, in Box Plaza. And I told him that. I don't know why I did. I was so nervous, I blurted it out. And he kind of looked at me like he didn't know what to say. And he said, well, you were one of the few. That was great. was pleasant. It was like kind of a compliment, also kind of a slam, just shows you how a good politician he was. But that was again a long time ago, and that was a long time ago in a different media landscape. And I got some little data here I thought I'd read, and I got a lot of pages here. I'm not going to put them all. Don't worry. I'm mindful of the time. There are 200 plus million iPhones in the world. And there are countless number of other smartphones. I see iPad here, obviously it's got a Galaxy. These are smartphones. These take photographs, they take movies, they show movies. This is the most sophisticated device we have to communicate and to persuade. That video, if it's distributed and distributed widely, will be seen on on people's phones, and when they're in a line, whether they're in a bus, or wherever they are. It is amazingly powerful. We don't do enough. The other side is way ahead of us. So there's about $1 billion in iPhone apps. Maybe probably this is about a couple years old, so probably $1.5 billion every year. It's a big business. There are on Twitter, if you go to Twitter, regularly million-plus follower personalities on Twitter, not just celebrities, but people. There are million subscriber people on YouTube, millions of people. 2, 3, 4 million subscribers for people you've never, have you heard of Shane Dawson? That's about 2.5, 3 million subscribers. Maybe you aren't quite young enough. Kids are watching this comedy team called Smosh. Millions of followers. Millions. Meaning when they put up a video, millions of people see that. MSNBC has about 600,000 viewers. Megyn Kelly, she's on Fox News now, she's at 9 o'clock, that was the news today. They're in the 2s and 3s, 2.5 million people on a good day, maybe a little bit more. They're right up there with the Twitter and the YouTube nobodies. This is good news for us. Because in the old days, if they didn't like what you said, they just did not put you, you were disappeared. Nobody paid any attention to you. You couldn't reach individuals, and now you can. And that's a big deal. Louis C.K. is a great comedian, it's a great show on FX. And it's nominated a bunch of Emmys, so he wins. It's a great show. I'm doing a show now at FX too, and so I'm sucking up a little bit, but even if I wasn't sucking up, I'd say this. He's also a comedian. And traditionally with comedians, what they do is they do club dates, and then they have a concert, and then HBO sponsors it, or somebody sponsors it, and they travel around, and they have an event sponsorship, and they give 70% to some group. And he decided not to do that. Last year, he decided to make his own concert and sell it himself for $5, PayPal or Venmo. And he made enough. I have the numbers. He was a little bit coy about the numbers, but he made over $1 million in the first 2 weeks. And he had to pay. What he had to pay were the people that actually did the work. He had to pay the guys who did the video. He had to pay the guys who did the distribution and the bandwidth. But he didn't have to pay any executives. He didn't pay any company. Nobody had to give him permission to do that. And that's kind of where we need to put our head in. Why are we keep asking for permission? We keep thinking about the New York Times, and CNN, and MSNBC. We keep asking for permission to spread our message. We don't need it anymore. And that's the good news. A quick primer. You drive through town, you start at Sunset Boulevard at the beach, you drive through the fancy Palisades, Brentwood, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, fancy houses, beautiful lawns. Who are these people? Right? Well, where did all that money come from? They can't all be movie stars or directors, right? They are the mandarins of the entertainment business, and probably the mandarins of a lot of other business too, right? They're the lawyers and bankers, the people who take a little fee, like in the old Ottoman Empire, the Sultan's minions, or the Chinese emperor's mandarins. They walk around and they have very distinct dress too, just like they did in the old days, like the kaftan and the mandarin outfit. And they are transaction fee rich people. They're gatekeepers, in other words. And they have a fantastic business, or they've had it until very recently, where you had to go to them first. And now they're being circumvented. People like Louis C.K. or the guys on YouTube, or the explosion of television the explosion of TV shows on the air now. Some of them are really good. And when I started, it said there was big three plus one. I mean, now I didn't look at the numbers on Monday or yesterday, but Breaking Bad. Have you been watching Breaking Bad? Breaking Bad is on AMC, which is the American Movie Channel. That's what AMC stands for. It used to run old movies. And at a certain point they thought, well, you know what, if I can get like 1 million or maybe 800,000 people to watch a scripted TV show, I can make some money. And that's why they put all this money into Mad Men and AMC and Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead, and all those shows that are doing huge business for them. The same thing with FX, the same thing with Showtime or HBO, the same thing with all of these little cable channels. They're making a huge business and they're reaching a lot of people, not by getting 20 million or 30 million viewers, but by getting 1 million viewers. I mean, who here has heard of the show on HBO called Girls? Who here watches it? 600,000 people at any given point are watching that TV show. But the awareness is almost 20, 30 times that. Again, that's a very good data point for people like us who feel like the culture and the cultural gatekeepers are not letting our message be heard. We have all the tools we need. We're just not energizing them. The analogy I use, I have a friend in Ohio. He's got 2 brothers, and they were years ago. They were casting around. They had little businesses they're starting, and there was a 3-bean salad factory in a neighboring town. And they looked at it, they scraped their money together, they mortgaged their houses, and they bought this factory. And basically what it is you buy a bunch of beans, and you boil them, and you stick them in jars, and you just fill them with vinegar. And it's a big old factory, and they named it, I think they named it Paisley Farms. There's not a farm near there, Paisley or otherwise, what do they call that? And they made 3-bean salad, and they put it in little stores in the area, and they put it in like a couple of warehouse stores like Costco or Sam's Club in Ohio. And one day, some guys flew up from Arkansas, in Bentonville, from Walmart, and they said, we like the 3-bean salad, we're going to put it in all the Walmarts. And they thought, we're rich, right? We're rich. All we have to do is keep making this 3-bean salad. But Walmart's smart. They said, okay, we figure it costs you about 97 cents for each big jar of 3-bean salad. So we're going to pay you 97 1/10 cents per jar. And if you don't say yes, we'll find somebody else to say yes. And they said yes. And so they make a lot of 3-bean salad now. And that is we love the free market efficiencies, that's good, right? Because then you can buy, it's pretty good 3-bean salad. You can buy it at Walmart, it's pretty cheap. It's as cheap as it could possibly be. And these guys are doing very, very well. They're not complaining about their profit. Their margin's teeny tiny, but they're making a zillion barrels of this 3-bean salad. They're doing okay. But that's what's happening to media now. It's just getting squeezed. So all those beautiful houses, all that stuff out there, all those people are scared. And they're scared for really good reasons. They're scared because their little sinecure, their big fat margin business, is getting eaten away. Bad for me, because that was fantastic. Those days were great. It was like a country club. Good for us all, because what it means is we have access now to what it takes to move and change people's minds. New media is going to destroy Hollywood, right? Every Hollywood says that. And that's good, because Hollywood will figure out a way to make money. Don't worry, some of you are crushed, worried about me. Don't worry, we'll figure out a way to do it. But it also means that there's a lot more entrepreneurial activity in communication, which is the way Hollywood started. I mean, the reason it's here in the first place, not just because of the sun, but because Thomas Edison and his patent police in the East Coast chased the old movie moguls out of the East Coast. because they were infringing on his patents, he believed. And so really the origin of the communications business, or the big mass media business in this country, is a little bit ahead of the sheriff. And I feel that sometimes when I watch the videos that James O'Keefe does, or I watch the work that Andrew Breitbart did before he died. These are like naughty kids. And and it's like, it's fun. Like on our side, we would cheer them. This is good news for us. But it's transgressive, it's a little rude, it bugs everybody in big media. I mean, part of the reason we love them, right, is because we know they just drive those people crazy. That in the New York Times editorial office, they're just pulling their hair out because, like, what is this new video that came out that exposes some kind of horrible fraud? That's all good news for us, right? But we have to be really careful about that, because we've created really good ways to talk to each other. And that's important, especially in a city like this, where you walk in and you think, oh, are all these people here who agree with me? Where were you all? And I remember when I first voted, my first primary election, I think it was a primary election, and I lived in Santa Monica at the time, and it was California didn't have primaries then. You had to go and you voted on the Republican ballot. I walked into a polling place, which was like a little, on the beach, it was like a little lifeguard storage shed. And I walked in, there's three lovely old ladies who sitting there, with their American flag pins, and they're like polling workers. And when I gave my name, went, oh, you, Rob, we've been waiting for you. And they gave me my ballot. It was my ballot, and a lemon bar. They were really nice, but clearly they were like, I was the celebrity that day because everybody else was, monolithically one party. And so it's nice when we can all see each other together and think, okay, well, we're not alone. And that's a very big part of what's happened to our side, is that we got, whether we knew it or not, we got dispersed. We got isolated. And they would tell us, well, you're an outlier. You're weird, you're out of step. You're wrong, you're behind the times. You need to catch up, you don't fit in. And one of the great things about new media, especially new social media, is it reminds you that you're not. It reminds you that there are millions of people, millions of Americans who agree with you. Some of them are a little crazy, right? But most of them are just normal people. I do this quiz with my liberal friends, and I say, how did the Tea Party start? And they always have some kind of weird idea, the gun nuts did it or something. No, it started a guy on CNBC. Yeah, these guys get mad about bailouts and about mortgage cram-downs. That's how it started. Ordinary Americans. And just free market Americans thinking, what on earth has happened to the country that used to have an entrepreneurial free market bent? And that's how it started. And I think along the way, the challenge for the people in the Tea Party, the challenge for people sort of on our side of the ledger, is to reclaim that identity. Because now it's shorthand for crazy raving nut. And we need to reclaim that. And the first thing we need to do is we need to connect with each other. And the second thing we do is, I think the really big word here is persuade. That video is persuasion. We think it's funny, but if you're in the middle or you're not even political, you'll think it's funny too. It's persuasive. And that is also very exciting, because the only way we're going to win is to get big. And that's the second great thing about the new media environment, is the scaling possibilities. The old days you had to print, every turn of your arm was printing one more pamphlet. And you could only hand out as many pamphlets as you could print. And then you can email, you can put it up anywhere. If you don't print anything, everybody reads it. It's instant scalability. You can connect to 1 million people easily. And so we're at a crossroads now on our side. One is, do we want to get big, or do we want to get pure? Right now, our side spends a lot of time, when we're not whining about big media and liberals, we spend a lot of time whining about our side. That they're not conservative enough. They're, I don't know about Mitch McConnell. He's not really, he's not one of us. And this is what happens to a movement in trouble. They start to turn on each other. And pretty soon, there'll be 4 of us. And so we on our side have to decide whether we want to be a big party that speaks to a whole lot of people about some big themes, or we want to be a small party that's pure and has a lot of specific positions. So do we want to be more like the Democratic Party, which wins national elections and wins the House and the Senate, and in many ways controls the tenor of the cultural debate in this country? Or do we want to be the Green Party, which is very pure, and occasionally makes some inroads, but it's not a majority party, it's not relevant. And those really are two models. So historically, I'd like you to think about 1964. Now, I don't know how, we all have very, very conservative friends. I have many, and I love them. And they're, when you get right down to it, after the third or fourth glass of wine, and you're talking about the history of America, and you say, well, a gold water. That was our high water mark, because we stood for something. I'd rather lose than stand for something.
Yeah.
Well, 1964, in my opinion, was the beginning of the end. That was the beginning of the Great Society, the beginning of the liberal welfare state, the beginning of the terrible 70s, which really cemented that idea of an ever-expanding government into the American voters' consciousness. They voted for it. And since 1964 to today, it's been an unbroken path to the left in this country, an unbroken path to big government. It slowed down a little under Reagan, but it didn't turn around. It just slowed down, and the minute he was gone, it picked right back up. They got big. That was their great big, that was their, I don't know whether they thought this, I don't know whether it was a plan, it was just organically. The Democratic Party got big. In 1975, 1978, 1980, 1985, you could find pro-life conservative Democrats. You could find low-tax, economic conservative Democrats. That party got big. It didn't stand for much except bigness. And it seems like an anathema to us, because we like to stand for something when our principles like to mean something. But when you're trying to persuade the people and trying to win back a country, getting big is really important. It's actually more important, I think, than adhering to a list of policy choices. Like Reagan used to say, look, if you're 70% my friend, it doesn't mean you're 30% my enemy. That's one of the reasons why he managed, in his way, to slow down the rate of government. But he didn't turn it around. Remember, people, I say this to my conservative friends back east, or any conservative pundits, they're always trying to figure out a way that in 2008 and 2012, we didn't lose. We didn't really lose. Polls show we didn't lose. And, the American people are kind of with us. We had a message problem. We lost. That's what that is. When they take over, we lose. They don't agree with us. So we have to persuade them. That's our challenge. And the good news is that if we can stop whining, we can really make some inroads. I'll give you, I want to open up so we can have some conversation here, but I just want, my analogy is I started in the media business, very small. It was a big business, very rich, very few choices. There are now in the media business a lot of choices, slim margins, a lot of freedom. This is an entrepreneur's dream. Whether you're an entrepreneur in making movies, somebody with an independent movie here, someone told me there's a Kickstarter thing happening here later on. This is all good stuff for us, right? This all is directionally correct with what we are. These are entrepreneurs taking risks, raising money, and coming up with a product. That's all happening. It should be happening in our public sphere as well. It should be happening in our political conversation and our political persuasion business as well. I love Fox News, but I'm not sure it persuades anybody. And, it's nice to watch because you're not going to be offended, but it's not persuading anybody out there. And there are people out there that we need, and we need to persuade them, that at least that they're 70% in agreement with us. At least lurking beneath them somewhere, there's a, old white guy who wants to keep his money. That I think is our inroad. And the great news for us is you can reach these people now. You don't have to ask permission for it. Culturally, if you ever read the 19th century novels, like what do those people do at night in those books, Jane Austen books, in the 19th century novels. At night, they have TV. So they'd sit around, they'd play music, they'd read to each other, they'd play a lot of games, and they'd gossip. And then at some point, when movies came out, we changed that to this you sit, you watch model, which which is not normal, not really kind of a human thing, where you sit in the dark next to people, all facing, watching one screen. That's how you pass an evening. It's very rare. The people who go to the theater, maybe once a month, they go to the theater all the time. That was a very rare activity. Mostly, they sort of communicated with each other. And you look at people doing it online now, which is rapidly competing with television and movies. What's Facebook, right? Letters, keeping up with people, gossip. That's what Twitter is, right? Games, video games. There's massive multiplayer games, people playing all over the world, Music, people playing music. They're playing Spotify. They're friends on Spotify playing playlists for each other, or they're playing Guitar Hero. So maybe we're not really changing. Maybe we're changing back. And that's good news for us. Because we already have those skills. And we've lost them because we're kind of conservatives and we're like, yeah, there's some order here, and but there's something about that community and building a community that kind of creates its own sense of outreach. And that's kind of what I think our opportunities are. And so I'll mention one thing. It's a little self-serving, but I want to mention, because I started with my friend Peter Robinson, who's a wonderful guy who does Uncommon Knowledge. I don't know if you see it. It's on the Wall Street Journal editorial homepage. He does these fantastic in-depth interviews with wonderful people. He's one of the very few people who can sit and talk with somebody really brilliant for an hour and get great stuff. And he was a Reagan speechwriter. He and I were complaining about this very subject one day, and he said, well, what do we do to change it? So we started this thing called Ricochet, ricochet.com. And it's two things, right? It's a place for people to sort of meet each other. And we discovered that a lot of our members feel that they're the only people in their community who have these views, and so they're like connecting with other people online who also have these views, who are halfway across the country, halfway across the world. And we want to give people a place to hang out and to talk and to network and connect on shared kind of cultural value. We also found a lot of those people want to know, okay, I have 10 liberal friends, and how do I get them to understand how bad Obamacare is? And we actually managed to get people to say, okay, I have my crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. Here's what I said to him, and shut him the hell up. And they'll start to communicate with each other and start to share with each other. They'll start to be, in other words, the very thing that the left started in the 20s and 30s in this country. A little cell, a little bit of support, the right words, vocabulary, a feeling of strength in numbers, and a little bit of courage to say, okay, well, I'm going to go out and persuade 2 or 3 more people. Not everything. I'm not going to persuade them for everything, but just enough, like in that video, just enough so that they start to rethink their handed down assumptions. And now we don't have to ask anybody's permission for it. I mean, I heard this great story when Peter Guber, who was a movie producer, took over Sony. They flew him to Tokyo for a big Sony directors meeting, and it's incredible. It's a beautiful thing, it's a beautiful room, and Sony's a giant company, so there's people all over, all these directors all over the world. There's translators like the UN. And he had a little head thing, and he's giving his, someone said, so, Mr. Guber-san, would you please explain your business model, business plan for the future? And he said, okay, here's my plan. We're going to make 30 movies this year. About 15 of them are going to do okay. If they're running back and do okay, they might have a life later on, we're not sure. About 5 of them are going to do okay and well enough that we can start thinking about maybe a sequel. And that'll be good too. And 2 or 3 of them we're going to probably make, because we have existing deals with writers and directors and actors, and we have to make them. And we just have to keep our fingers crossed. 3 or 4 of them are going to be gigantic hits. And about 7 or 8, whatever the remaining are, going to be outright bombs. So somebody from the back raised his hand and said, Mr. Guber-san, I have a question. Why do you insist on making the bombs? Which, if you're a conservative, is funny, right? Because you can't succeed unless you risk. And with every risk comes failure. That's just the way it is. We know that. If you're a liberal, you're like, well, wait a minute. We can fix that. There's a way to figure out a way so that nothing will ever go wrong. And I think most Americans are on our side, fundamentally. We just need to do a better job of telling them that they are on our side, of telling them things like this video, and we have all the tools we need. I have a timer I set in my office when people are complaining about something we can't do anything about. And I say 30 seconds. Complain all you want, but after that, no more. And I think that our side would do better. Instead of waking up and trying to find what the most recent absurd thing was said on MSNBC, or the most recent crazy crackpot thing some of the Obama administration did. Instead, put a clock on it, and right after that, try to find 4 or 5 or 6 people, or 4 or 5 or 6 opportunities to offer up the better path. We can do that. We have everything we need, it's right here. And the only thing we're lacking right now is the courage to do it, and the enthusiasm for all of this stuff. The other side has it, and we don't. Thanks very much. Family. I think you have to pick your battles for that stuff. Our side tends to have this gigantic monolithic view of what it's like to be, or what you have to be a conservative. Half the time we argue about it, that's not really conservative view. Wait a minute. I think you have to pick your battles, and I don't think you need to attach it to any action. The great thing that the left did was they simply created a mindset. They didn't force you to vote for the Democratic Party. They just became left. And I think that we could do that too. We could do things like highlighting absurdities. I tend to stop a lot of my left-wing friends by saying, especially with technology, you get a new piece of technology, what do? You set your preferences, right? Look at all those things that are individualized that we have. The phone, the computer, the car, everything. So why is our healthcare, why does that have to be so monolithic? Why does the public school system have to be so monolithic? And they always think, yeah, you're kind of right. I make all these choices in my life. I set my preferences, right, to use the term we always use, for everything. But I can't set my preference for schools. And I can't set my preference now for my healthcare. And that, I think maybe, I would say engage, but don't engage on this global idea of winning them over. I think we have to start smaller. We just have to make them rethink their assumptions. That's a win for us. That's the benefit of being incredibly marginalized as we are. Wins are small. We can celebrate that. Because it's the easier path, right? Our path was simply, at a certain point we gave up trying to argue that the liberal welfare state was bad, and instead we just said we want to cut it a little bit and keep taxes low. So we ended up having this gigantic, so we created a population now that believes you get everything for free. That's uphill for us. But it doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be devastating. We don't need everybody to sign up for everything. We just need them to sign up for a few things. It's easier to get people to understand the value of individual choice. That individual choice is the best method for keeping healthcare costs down. That any healthcare system anyone comes up with, no matter how brilliant they are, that doesn't put the consumer at the center of the choice is just doomed to fail. Whether it's potatoes in Poland and the Soviet Union, whether it's rents in Manhattan, anytime you control the prices of something, the cost of it goes up and the scarcity goes up. That's the law. And I always challenge my left-wing friends to come up with one example where that isn't the case in the world, and they can. So I would just think, again, I mean, I hate to be I feel like I want to be a cheerleader and say we can storm barricades, but we can. We can. We overlap the American people, and when they hear our platform, they hear our opinions, our policy prescriptions, they reject them. They don't know how they got there. They don't know how to connect those dots. Because we just assume that, we'll put on an ad on TV, we'll get a really persuasive, really charismatic leader, and that'll be that. It doesn't work that way anymore. So, I'm not sure that answers your question, I don't know if there is one, but I think we just have to pick smaller battles, and find friends where we can find them. Right now we have kind of a circular firing squad going on. It's virtually in Washington, and it's not helpful. Well, I mean, getting big, going for it being a majority party, which means that we're going to have to give up some purity tests. I'll just be super honest, right? It means the Republican Party is going to have to make its peace with its pro-choice side. It's It's going to make its peace with a lot of the social issues it doesn't like. I'm not saying it has to change its mind, but it can't reject those people. It needs to understand that to be a majority party, you need a little bit of everybody. And that means that you might have 70% friends in your party, but they're not necessarily 30% enemy. That's the way the Democratic Party did it, and they were phenomenally successful. So in a way, I'm not suggesting we rethink the strategy. I'm saying our opponents executed a strategy, deliberately or not, from 1964 to today, that got them every single thing they wanted. There's not, if you could somehow say to LBJ today, by the way, national health care, he'd be astounded. Really? I never in a million years thought that would happen. But it happened because we lost the thread of the conversation with the American people. My favorite political writer, an absolute genius, a person I have met a couple times and talked to, and I never really know what I'm going to say because he's so smart, is Thomas Sowell, who says, his massive argument is the smartest. He says there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. And once you, on our side we already know that, but we forgot. They own the storytelling industry, and we let them. A lot of times when we tell stories, they're a little bit, get it, Rod Dreher has a column I read a while ago. He thought that we've lost our side lost the ability to tell stories, and tell stories about people's lives, ordinary people's lives. And you kind of hear it sometimes with our politicians, this kind of tin ear for connecting with people and telling them stories that are like, well, here's why I think the way I think. And here's what my parents did, or here's what my friend, here's what my sister did. And that hurts us, because we just look like, we look like grown-ups, we look like the party of none. And we're not. We're really the party of limitless possibility and limitless opportunity. And we've done a very bad job. And we're never, the New York Times editorial board is never going to wake up and say, you're right. We're so sorry. They haven't done that with Stalin yet. They still are like covering up their stuff with him, right? So they're never going to change their mind. And we just waste our time and our effort and our energy complaining and worrying about it when there are, there's 5 or 6 million people out there in America of all colors and shapes and sizes who are persuadable. And all we need to do is persuade them. My trick is to get more super granular. I just say food stamps. Why do we have food stamps? Well, there was starvation, hunger, alleviate hunger. Okay. Alleviate hunger in the underclass, that's why food stamps started. What's the problem in the underclass now? Obesity. So that's success, right? And usually go, well what? Yeah. Well, I have a young friend of mine in the Bay Area who works for a publishing house. And it's a very sort of new agey publishing house. And I was telling him I was coming here to talk to a Tea Party group. And he's a left of center. I said, what do you think I should say? And he said, well, you should tell them they're doing a lot better than the Occupy movement, which is a big shambles. But the Occupy movement gets a lot more respect. I think that what they wanted to see in the Tea Party movement was pretty much what the Tea Party movement left the Republican Party because of. I mean, everybody I knew in the Tea Party movement was sort of essentially like, you're like, can we just focus on individual liberty, small government, classic American values, classic American free enterprise values. Let's just do that. We seem to have failed at that. So let's, instead of talking about all this other stuff, let's just focus on that again. I mean, I have a friend of mine who's a high school basketball team somewhere in rural Missouri, the worst basketball team ever. They were terrible. Basically every kid who wanted to play could play because the school's so small. And they had a coach there who would give them, coaching advice, and they would always blow it. And so once he called a timeout, he got everybody together and said, here's the next play. The minute one of you has control of the ball, I want you to stop, I want you to put it down and run away. And like, the kids were like, well, why? Because I just want to know you could do one thing. And I feel like that should be the Tea Party argument, right? Let's just do one thing. We're terrible at everything. Let's just do one thing and get government more in line with our free market values. And I think that's the great thing about the Tea Party is it's kind of a big unformed mess, right? That's what's the best thing about it, right? Nobody's president of the Tea Party, nobody runs the Tea Party, nobody's chairman of the Tea Party, there's no Tea Party commission, there's no Tea Party. It's a bunch of citizens. But that also means that it's easy to be misinterpreted and be misconstrued. So I don't know if I would want to lose that. I just think it means just trying harder and to not get entangled in the other stuff. Just to focus on the four things. Just do one thing, four things. And it's harder. It's hard. When Reagan discovers, if you keep saying the same thing, it's just harder to misquote you. It's really hard to distort what you say as long as you're just saying four things. Yeah, I mean, the problem with Republicans, they always say, is that they're so Republican, so they're corporate. I don't know how to solve that problem, but I think that's exactly the problem. And I think that's also exactly the solution. $500,000, by the way, is an enormous amount of money. It's an enormous amount of money in the new media, actual Hollywood show business. I mean, I think the Louis C.K. episode cost $800,000. That's broadcast nationally. He's going to win the Emmy this year, and probably will win the Emmy this week. That's pretty good. It's a lot you can do. I think part of the problem with our leaders or the money people is that they live in Washington. They like Washington. They like that system. It's simple, right? Everybody gets rich. Rush Limbaugh years ago had a great, called the Limbaugh Switch or something. He said that when K Street, all the big lobbying groups are lined up. And he said that when or if they identify absolutely specifically the gay gene, the gene that makes you gay, all the pro-life people in the middle of their fundraising phone calls put the phone down. And all the pro-choice people across the street will put the phone down. And all go downstairs, walk across K Street, switch offices, go back up, and pick up the phone right where they left off. And I don't know if you're serious or not, but there's something truthful about that. There's something truthful about all that money we spent, our side spent, and we didn't persuade anybody. And that's why I think the great persuaders, look, I say this, I'm a broken record, you've heard me say this before too. People in this country are persuadable. This country, this part is half the country, which was built entirely on courage and whiskey. A few years after that, we voted to constitutionally ban alcohol. You could persuade people. All the great, big, powerful movements in America started from one person on the back of a horse-drawn carriage or a flatbed truck, going from town to town to town, having essentially revival meetings. That's how we persuade Americans. Now, you can do it a little easier than with these, but you still have to do it personally. And so, I hope that our money guys get that. I suspect they don't. I was on an NR cruise. Oh, right. And we're sitting at the table, and a bunch of people at the table, all walks of life, business people, families, retirees, young people, and all shades of conservative, from the squishiest rhino like me to the hard right. They all agreed that we needed to do something different. And it was funny because a lot of people on the dais, meaning the fancy pants people who were coming to Washington to explain what happens in these elections, they didn't think we need to do anything different. And that's, anybody who sees that happen, that's the opportunity. But the good news for us is that we don't need anybody. We don't need $500,000. Andrew Breitbart, give him $500,000, it would have been completely different. He didn't need it. He didn't need it. To me, the issue right now, I think, it's the Obamacare exemption for the House and Senate. It's like, I mean, come on, that's a gift, right? We should be able to run with that. That crystallizes the problem with big government. It's going to be really lousy for you and for me, but they're going to be taken care of. Don't worry about that. I think that Washington was the most responsive that first summer after the Tea Party started, the summer of those town hall meetings. And that was when they were all terrified. And they're more terrified of looking stupid with somebody's camera phone than anything else. So again, I would say, the way I would say, look, a party gets big and it has power. I think it's the same thing with a movement of citizens. If you get big and noisy, they have to listen to you. You don't have to call them. They'll call you. And I think that's probably where we sometimes get gummed up. So I don't know if there's a specific one I would suggest. I think sometimes it's a rabbit hole. You get on Twitter and it's just, it looks like it's all really important.
Join Ricochet.
Well, thank you. You could join Ricochet. And what Ricochet is a place to have those conversations with people who are of like mind, who, there's a debate, but of like mind, in a very civil atmosphere. Our members pay a little bit every month, and we've designed so that everyone has skin in the game. Nobody pays a little bit every month to go and spout obscenities. We have a very strict code of conduct. It's like a dress code for comments. So you kind of know if you share something or post something or make a comment or want to get a conversation, it's not going to devolve into a swamp. And the interesting thing is, we find that conservatives really love that. Liberals don't get it. Because if you read the comments of the Huffington Post or anything else, there's a horrible swamp, right? Our side likes a little bit of civility. That's sometimes to our detriment, but in this case, when we're together, I think it's to our credit. What if that citizen had read those, I forget his name, I can't blank him. Joe. What if he had read that article or that poll and said, oh, well, no point in doing anything. And the only poll that matters is the one that took place in Colorado. Believe me. That's the only one that matters. And he went ahead and did it. And he was told it wasn't going to work, and then it worked. We always said this, when I first came to Hollywood, people said, you can write any movie, it's wide open, people love the scripts, any script you want, any movie you want, as long as it's not a Western. No Westerns. And then somebody wrote a Western, and then it was a big hit. I think it was Silverado or something. Big hit. Like, okay, you can do Western now. Nothing works until it works. And so I would say that sometimes our problem is that we end up getting enmeshed in these arguments that are Washington-based, about a poll said this, a poll said that, and forget that actually door-to-door, knocking on doors, you learn more and you have more power. That's how you change things. It really is how you change things. And it's how you change things forever. We haven't changed, we're changing back, right? That guy knocked on doors. That's still how you get elected. And Barack Obama knows that. Well, I think the left did a lot of things. It's hard to remember this now, but Jimmy Carter was a conservative Southern Democrat when he ran. And Bill Clinton was a conservative Southern Democrat. Remember, Bill Clinton stopped campaigning in 1992 to go back to Little Rock to preside over the execution of a retarded person. Can you imagine what would happen if Mitt Romney had done that? So the Democratic Party had a very broadly defined sense of what was acceptable within its own, disorganized mess of an enterprise, right? That was what they always said, I don't belong to any organized party, I'm a Democrat, right? But it was an effect, I don't know if it was by design, but it was effective. So you had conservative Democrats. I remember somebody said this about Lincoln, but I remember talking to somebody and say, all these racist conservatives like George Wallace. Wallace was a Democrat, people forget. In 1972, he was a Democrat. Well, it had changed, but it's a really recent modern American history. The Democratic Party had far-right conservative Democrats and very far-left. They had Tom Hayden, and they had, Strom Thurmond for a while, and they had Lloyd Benson and people like Robert Byrd. These were basically culturally conservative people. They were big government. They were kind of, on the graft, right, on the take. But that was, that's American history too. So nobody got run out, and they got big. And they actually, the bigger they got, the better it was for the people who were the true believers, the actual pure group, the pure, the China white and the Democratic Party. They got what they wanted. The party has accomplished a lot of left-wing fantasies for 1972. If you're George McGovern, you must have been looking at this thinking, that's one thing that always surprised me about the administration. It really is the McGovern administration that he wanted in 1972 when he lost to Nixon. So they allow themselves that, whereas we tend to be very suspicious of people. Example, what happened in the Delaware Senate election with Christine O'Donnell and the other guy.
Castle.
Yeah, Castle. Now Castle would have won. He would have been a senator. Would he have been a writer? Yeah, but he would have caucused with Republicans. That's important. You get to organize the Senate. Be closer to a Republican Senate. Castle wouldn't have been on every committee, but it would have been much better to have a Republican Senate Judiciary Committee than a Democratic Senate Judiciary Committee. And so, we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes. He's about as conservative a guy as you're going to get from Delaware. And he wasn't conservative enough for Delaware voters. It's their choice. I'm not complaining, but that was a mistake. And it was a mistake based on purity. And we hurt ourselves. And I think we're going to have to rethink that. On a lot of social issues too. I'm not saying change your mind. I'm not saying decide that you were wrong about whatever issues you feel strongly about. But understand that in a big fat country, there are only two choices that matter: Republican or Democrat. That's the way it really is. And we're going for big.